I don't check it. So if people are watching it on YouTube, it is. I'm at home, so usually I'm on a faster computer, but I'm on Microsoft Surface and it's super slow. Like if I have like 90 different video tabs running.
Gotcha. Yeah, no worries. Yeah, my home Wi-Fi has like plummeted in efficacy over the past few weeks. So.
Oh, you know what I could do? I could just pause it on here and then watch the chat. Yeah, I'll do that. You do that. I don't know if that's a good idea. What'd you say about your computer? Sorry.
No. My what's it called? My home internet's just gotten so much worse over the past few weeks.
Oh, really? Yeah. That sucks. Yeah, it's. I think there's been a lot of issues. Wait, let me just send an email to everyone because people sometimes, I don't know, make a mistake when joining for whatever reason. Copy invitation, copy attendee invitation. Yeah, some people like don't go back onto Eventbrite. There's like, everyone, I've attached the direct Zoom information. Hello. Okay, I've sent that out. Let's see, is anyone on? Yet. Oh, someone just jumped on. My hand just jumped on. And then I'll post this on YouTube. Hello, everyone. I see people are beginning to join. I'm just posting the YouTube URL to Twitter and LinkedIn, and then we'll get started, everyone. I'm live with. Is it your Twitter handle is Michael Loffe?
It's at Real
Loffe.
Yep.
Yeah, I'm live with Real Loffe from Arist. Arist. Talk about future SMS. Okay. Posted up the Twitter, and then let's post it to LinkedIn, and then we'll get started.
Sweet.
And for everyone in the chat, this will get posted to YouTube, and then we will, if you want to replay it to watch. So cool. I did that, and then let me just make sure no one else is having any issues. I think one person. I think we have people in the chat. Everyone always has issues getting in. I always get like an email. I always check now that they can't get in. That's why I'm switching to YouTube, but there's still a few on Zoom. Everyone should have started getting it. Okay, cool. So we'll get started, and then hopefully nobody has, any more issues getting in. Everyone's in. But so first off, thank you everyone for joining us today. My name is Ari Lewis. I'm the co-founder of Green Block Group, which is a strategic communications firm. And I am the co-founder of OhioX, which is a tech trade association based in Ohio. I do a weekly conversation with a guest specifically about brand building and digital platforms. So how to build brands on digital platforms. And this week I have Michael Ioffe. Am I pronouncing your last name right?
Yaffe, close. Yeah.
Yaffe. I was close.
It's a tough last name to get right. So.
Michael Yaffe, and he is building Arist, which is a SMS platform for learning. And our conversation, we're going to talk about what he's doing. but we're also going to talk about how SMS is, a platform for the future of conversation. So Michael, I'll let you take it away.
Awesome. Awesome. Yeah. So first off, thanks so much for having me here. And if it helps, I can just start by walking through sort of the story behind Arist and how we, how we got started, and then we can have the conversation go from there.
Yeah, that'd be perfect. I think it would be great, to give sort of your background as well as the background on what you guys are doing.
Sweet. Yes. So my background is primarily in the nonprofit space. When I was, for context, both my parents are refugees. And so, growing up, education was a huge part of my life, and the emphasis of education in my household was immense. So very, very early on, I started realizing, a number of significant gaps in the education landscape. The high school that I went to was very unique. It was an urban public high school that was very, very diverse socioeconomically. So, 10 to 20% of students were extremely wealthy kids of Nike execs. Then 10 to 20% of students were homeless, or super low income. And I started realizing that social capital played an immense role in the way that in outcomes for students, right? So, two students who were equally as intelligent could have dramatically different paths in life, even going to the same school, simply based on who their parents knew and the conversations that they had access to. So I sort of started my work in education by founding an organization called Tile.org, which today is one of the world's largest educational entrepreneurship education focused nonprofits. About 450 locations in over 50 countries, and we're backed by everybody from Google to the Diller Family Foundation. And Tile was founded with the explicit goal of bridging the social capital gap. Essentially, once a month, we would host a live discussion between students and a local entrepreneur. And the discussions were never filmed, and they were designed to be very, very intimate and in person, and to provide a level of access to these really, really interesting innovators, leaders, and entrepreneurs that most students, particularly low-income students, didn't have access to. So I launched Tile when I was 15 in my sophomore year of high school, with one location, which was a little bit difficult, mainly because no one would take me seriously. I was like a 5'3" kid walking around downtown Portland, asking event spaces to rent out basements.
And not to interrupt you, but
Yeah.
Michael is one of the most impressive people I've ever met in my life. I've Michael pitched me the product, and it was probably the greatest product, pitch I've ever heard on anything. So, Michael starting it at 15, he was probably smarter than 99% of the population at that age. So I said to add that in for you.
Well, I appreciate it. That's very, very kind of you. But I mean, at that point, I had no idea what I was doing. I was sort of bumbling around and trying to figure out how to put this together. But with Tile, we very quickly realized that these, if we could get students to convince local event spaces to donate their spare space, we found that no event space no theater in the U.S. works on Mondays. So we hosted all Tile events on Mondays, because that's when we could get really nice spaces for free. And we realized if we could get high school students to convince local theaters to donate their event space and convince local business leaders to come and speak for free, we could create a very sustainable series of conversations that could have a really, really great impact for not a lot of expenditures. So we ended up hosting the first season of events, which featured everybody from the co-founder of WebMD, to the co-founder of Learning.com. We were able to host that first series of events for under $50. And we started realizing that this model that we had created was super scalable. And so we ended up growing Tile from one location in Portland to about 300 locations within a year and a half.
Wow.
So yeah, the growth was crazy. At the same time, we started realizing, as we were expanding to more and more locations, we started realizing that access in a lot of locations globally was far more limited than we had expected. So one of our most successful locations was in the war zone in Yemen. And I couldn't understand for the life of me why we were getting 400 students to come to our events in Sana'a, Yemen, when we were barely getting 50 to 100 students to come hear the CEO of the Jordan brand in Portland. I just, the disparity made no sense to me. And so what happened was I started getting on the phone with our chapter leader in Yemen, a student named Mohammed Al-Adlani, and just asking him a ton of questions about the war zone in Yemen, the educational situation there, all sorts of things. And what we very quickly learned was that along with being, along with sort of having a conflict zone and not having access to a school for over 4 years, right? Because schools shut down very, very quickly. Students in Yemen didn't really have access to the internet. And so access to online video course platforms like Coursera, Udemy, etc., was impossible, right? Nobody could take a video course. And I started realizing that this myth that I think had been pushed a lot in the digital learning space, right? That any student in the world could grab their iPad or grab a laptop and watch Sebastian Thrun lecture about AI. That was not actually happening, right? And most students globally can't actually learn online because they don't have internet, or they don't have high enough bandwidth internet to learn. So I became obsessed with this question of, how do we deliver educational content to students in Yemen? And there were quite a number of barriers. First off, as an American citizen, I currently can't travel to Yemen. I can't send books to Yemen. I can't send money to Yemen. Right? I can't deliver video course content in Yemen. And eventually we realized that text messages were pretty much our only option, because even though most people don't have access to the internet, almost everybody has access to a phone. And so we ended up working with a few professors from Babson and USC to design the first text message course. When I told my professor about it and asked him to help, he thought I was like joking, like he thought I was completely insane.
Because of the texting aspect, or because of the like Yemen aspect, or a bit of both?
I think both. Very, very few nonprofits are active in the Yemeni conflict zone. It's a very, very difficult place to operate, and resources are pretty limited. And also because I think that to a tenured professor, right, who's been teaching in a very, very specific style for 40 or 50 years, the idea of converting course content into text message was absurd. And so it took a little bit of convincing, but we ended up converting a Babson College course on entrepreneurship into text message format. And to our surprise, along with being really, really accessible, the course was remarkably effective. That first pilot course, which we deployed to initially just a few hundred students in the United States, just to see if the course content worked, if the model worked. That first course had completion and satisfaction rates of well over 90%.
Wow.
Which compares to about 5% for a traditional video-based course. So we very, very quickly realized that we were onto something. And we ran Arist as a nonprofit project under Tile for a bit, and then started realizing that these courses that we were creating for students in need, this same course model could be applied in the corporate space for everything from sexual harassment training to onboarding, leadership development, all of these relatively boring corporate courses that are often very, very important, but aren't delivered in the right way, right? I think in learning generally, content is not the issue, right? Delivery is the issue. And we started realizing that we could fix the delivery problem and also use revenue from corporate clients to subsidize all of our impact work. So yeah, we ended up. Oh, sorry. I think you have a question.
No. Keep
Okay.
going.
Okay.
Keep going.
So yeah. And so essentially, just to quickly wrap up that whole story, we ended up building out a text message learning platform, just to enable organizations to very, very quickly design and launch text message courses. And we launched that platform in September, and then since then we've now had about 700 or 800 organizations sign up. Of those,
Wow.
about 600 have signed up within the past, I think 6 to 8 weeks, which has been crazy. So it's been a crazy ride, and it's been, I think the biggest challenge so far has just been getting people to take their first course. We find that once people take their first course, they very, very quickly get a sense of how powerful the medium can be. But that first step is always the hardest.
Yeah. So, there's so much stuff there. So, I'll start from the end and work to the beginning, which is usually not the way to go. But, I think about SMS, and it's almost like a regression of technology, right? We have all these powerful communication tools, and now I'm not just even talking about email. People are like Slack, and now there's all these other new messaging apps. For those in the chat, there's a new Silicon Valley company called Clubhouse. It's like audio-based messaging, and they have like 1,000 users, and they're already valued at $100 million. And it's really interesting because a lot of people have been talking about audio, they've been talking about Slack, they've been talking about all these tools, but you guys are focusing on text, and that's really interesting. obviously one of the points you made was about in the globe, people can use SMS or WhatsApp. By the way, Michael's platform works on WhatsApp, which is what a lot of people use. So, why do you think that is a more successful platform than Slack and email? But I think another topic that I would like to get into too is, can you touch on companies like Community, and other SMS platforms? Because it almost seems like there's been this transition that SMS is more powerful than ever. More people are using it as a channel. Can you also touch on why that is and what's going on in that part of the space?
Sure thing. Yeah. So to touch on why I think SMS is sort of blowing up right now, I think there's three main reasons. The first one is saturation, right? We're seeing pretty much every other content medium get extremely saturated. And also, for example, I get like, a few hundred emails every single day. And getting through all of them is very, very difficult. I think email open rates are hovering around 15 to 20% right now. And 95% of people open a text message within 3 minutes. Right. So there's just a different prioritization in terms of what we're more likely to open and what we're more likely to read. And also, I think messaging APIs have come a long way. For example, you previously couldn't do payments over text message. And now in India, for example, text message based payments are widespread. I think within the next few years, we'll see text message based payments, and for example, sending your credit card info over text message. I think we'll see that become the norm as well. And already, I think just earlier today, a messaging based payments app in Europe, I think raised like 10 or 20 million. So I think a lot of the underlying technology that enables really, really powerful messaging based applications is starting to become better and better. I mean, for us, the fact that Twilio exists and the fact that messaging APIs exist that we can very, very quickly plug into is a big deal. I think another
and I want to interrupt you because I don't know how technical the audience is. So Twilio, guys, is API for text messaging, and most of you have used it. You just don't know you use it. So whenever you get a text message from Uber, that's actually Twilio. Though I think Uber might have built out their own finally. So it used to be. I don't know if it still is. But most times when you get a text message from like a application, it's typically powered by Twilio, which is they're a publicly traded company, and they're the largest SMS API. So most companies use it when they want to send out text messages to customers, to whatever stakeholder it is. I wanted to interrupt to explain to the audience.
Without a doubt. And I think one of the really amazing things that Twilio has done over the past few years is they made it really, really easy for developers and for product creators to add in not just SMS as a channel, but other messaging platforms as a channel, right? So within the next few months, we'll actually be rolling out integrations with Slack, Line, WeChat, and a few other messaging platforms. So you'll be able to take your Arist course on whatever messaging platform you prefer. And already, because Facebook has been really, really pushing messaging as the future of their business as well. WhatsApp's API has opened up, which is, that's been a huge deal. And Facebook's API, Facebook Messenger's API has opened up as well. So we're seeing a lot of these closed messaging systems that were previously only used for peer-to-peer communication. We're now seeing them open up to business use cases. Even Apple, is now opening up iMessage for third-party apps. And you can now like text Home Depot from iMessage, which is super cool. And I think we're going to see more and more of that, where messaging becomes, along with the place to communicate with your friends, also the place to do business.
So, talking about text messaging trends, one of the, trends that I've talked about here, as well as, in my writing, is short form video content. And I think that's aligned with what you're seeing in the texting space, because it's sort of shifting from long form content and just longer content in general to this shorter form content. Can you talk about maybe some of the negative implications and consequences of that? Because I think a lot of people, and not to use this word, derogatory, but right, we talk about boomers. I see it all over, like, oh, this person's a boomer. They're not using, social or text or whatever. But do you think these implications are bad for, society? So like for you guys, for learning, our retention rates, can they be affected? Or at the same time, I also see the pros of it's a democratization of, learning where people didn't have those opportunities. So, can you talk about, I guess, some of those negative implications as well?
Yeah, sure thing. So I think, just to answer your question about retention rates first, actually retention rates for most text message courses are dramatically higher than most video courses, mainly because we use this spaced learning model that we use a ton of essentially learning science and learning research to ensure that retention rates are very, very high. Um, my younger sister uses TikTok. I'm not sure if you're an active
I'm
TikTok.
very, very familiar. I don't make videos, but I'm a very active user.
Me too. Yeah, I've become a very, very active TikTok. Yeah.
And actually, wait, I want to interrupt because I don't know if everyone knows what TikTok is. So TikTok is a social media app, has like 200 million users or something like that, 300 million users. It's mostly being used by not even millennials, but like Gen Z. Like millennials are old for the app.
Yeah.
And it's the videos can't be longer than 15 seconds. Some of them you can do a minute. It's either 15 seconds or a minute. And to talk about like how powerful it is, like one of the largest influencers on the platforms is Charlie D'Amelio or Amelio. She has 50 million followers, right? So like bigger than most countries. So it's an extremely, widely used app amongst Gen Z, and it's very influential in making a ton of, changes in how consumers consume content and how brands are reacting. So just wanted to give a background on that just in case someone wasn't familiar with it.
Yeah, without a doubt. Yeah, so I think the interesting thing about TikTok, apart from democratizing access to content, right? I mean, there are chemistry teachers who make TikTok videos that have received millions and millions and millions of views and have taught millions of students, right? I think one of the most negative aspects of, I think one of the most traditionally considered negative aspects of short form content is lack of depth, right? And I think that's for us. I mean, that's the most common criticism that we get. It's like, hey, like you can't really go deep in a 10 or 15 or 20-day text message course, right? The reality is that most of what we learn on a day-to-day basis is not, super deep content. For example, even in most college courses, like I just took an accounting course at my college. And the content that we learned wasn't very deep and could easily be condensed into a series of 10 to 15 core insights, right, and core exercises. I think that there's definitely a time and place for like an in-depth discussion about Shakespeare, for example. And I don't think, I don't think text messaging or short form content is a good fit for that type of learning. But I would say that type of in-depth discussion or that type of in-depth inquiry only really makes about 20% of the learning that we conduct on a day-to-day basis. And so for the 80% of learning that we do conduct on a day-to-day basis, short form content is great because it condenses everything to the absolute essential. We took a course from an Ivy League university in the Northeast, and it was I think like a 3 or 4 hour long video lecture that we condensed into 4 text messages. And when we showed it to the professor, he was like, "Oh wow, like that, like where, like how, like there's no loss of content, right? Like we condense every single thing that he said into 4 text messages. And the reality is that oftentimes in video courses, there's no limit to the amount of to how much you can talk. And on the contrary, people are encouraged to talk and create more. And that's we need to create barriers for teachers and educators to ensure that what they're delivering to students is as pithy, as condensed, and as well done as possible. And actually, I noticed that Scott, what's up, Scott, by the way? So Scott is one of created one of my favorite courses on the Arist platform. It's a Cold War course that Scott is using to supplement his teaching at JFA High School in Los Angeles. It's an incredible course. I recommend that everybody takes it. So Scott is asking what the ideal length of a text message course is. Initially we thought that 20 to 30 days was ideal. What we found now is that 20 to 30 days is ideal if it's in supplement to a larger, course. We generally find that for standalone courses, 10 to 20-day courses really, really works well.
Yeah, and he also asked about drop-offs and student engagements, I guess, to talk about, obviously you said you have high retention, but drop-offs as well.
Yeah. Drop-offs we start seeing, I think, after day 15 or day 20. That's sort of I think the maximum attention span over a long period of time for most learners.
So, we touched on sort of messaging as a trend, and by the way, if anyone has any questions, just feel free to put it in the Q&A and in the chat, and we'll get to them. But can you also talk about, so, some of the organizations you have, 800 organizations, right? You said now, and I don't know if you can name who is using you guys, but especially for the larger, more enterprise companies, what are they finding valuable? And do you think you're going to start seeing, and I guess right now, obviously the answer is collaboration, because you're talking about like you're collaborating with Facebook Messenger, with Slack. Do you see those types of platforms going to be more active? I guess they wouldn't compete with you necessarily, but starting to really become more active in like SMS messaging type space through, and when I mean that, I mean like a Slack message going to a text, right? Going to iMessage opposed to doing it through the app. And two, how do they see messaging right now? Is it complementary to their business? Is it a competitor to their business? So I know that was a bunch, so I'm happy to repeat it, but can you, I guess, touch on all that stuff?
Yeah, sure thing. So yeah, I think one of the bigger issues that messaging is going to face over the course of the next over the course of the next few years is interoperability, right? And I mean the way messaging is right now is essentially you have like maybe like
and sorry to interrupt, just to
Sure.
explain, because I don't know, interoperability might not be interoperability, what he means by that is, and correct me if I'm wrong, an iPhone, an Android, and other different types of platforms. So maybe not just the hardware, but also the software. Can Facebook Messenger talk to iMessage? So making sure all these platforms are connected. I just wanted to make sure everyone understood that.
Yeah, exactly. And I think one of the things that we may see within the next few years is a tool that allows you to to iMessage somebody from your iPhone to like a Slack user, right? Send an iMessage to a Slack user, send a Facebook message, right, to a Microsoft Teams user. I think we're eventually going to see platforms start to integrate more seamlessly, because right now, essentially, like if you're using WhatsApp, it's almost like this hermetically sealed ecosystem, right? And it's pretty limiting, I think, for most businesses that operate on messaging ecosystems to have to essentially recreate your app or recreate your platform for every single different ecosystem. So that I think that's going to be a barrier. But in terms of on the corporate side, what we're seeing a lot of organizations use it for, where we've been able to add a lot of value, I think is primarily in supplementing existing course content, right? Supplementing existing course content or providing or replacing course content for frontline workers. One example is one of our largest clients is a safety trainer that conducts safety training for I think half the Fortune 500, right? And one of their biggest issues is if you're working on an oil rig in the middle of the Gulf of Mexico, you don't have internet access, right? And you maybe have your phone on you, but you definitely don't have a laptop. And if they give you a leaflet, you're going to lose it immediately, right? And the craziest part is that for a lot of frontline positions where training is often needed the most, there still is no simple solution for training, right? You either have to watch videos in a break room, right, or you're given pamphlets and leaflets that nobody reads and that are lost immediately. And so we're seeing that we're adding a lot of value there. And then also, conversely, on the complete opposite side of the conversation, we're adding a lot of video to executive training. One of the largest soft beverage manufacturers in the US is using Arist to reinforce workshops and conferences because their executives forget most of what they learn within a few days after finishing up a workshop or conference. And that is really problematic for the training department because they invest millions and millions of dollars into these really, really high fidelity trainings that sort of go nowhere, right?
So, one of the things as well that I want to touch on is, we've seen all these revolutions in communications. Now, as I said in the beginning, now we're going back to text, right? But do you think a lot of the problems don't stem from the platforms themselves, but the way people are using them and the way people communicate?
That's an interesting question. Yeah, I mean, I think already what we're seeing is as messaging becomes a little bit more saturated, response rates are slowly starting to decline. Open rates are slowly starting to decline. And I one of my big worries is that over time, as more and more companies start using messaging to communicate with their employees, with their students, with their clients, we're going to see sort of messaging also become a little bit more saturated. Um, and I just, I don't know if there's any way to fix that. I think inevitably either the way that we manage messages is going to have to change. I've already seen a few email apps that will send you, emails as a block, right? Like once every 2 hours. So that they'll essentially block all of your emails and only send them to you once every 2 hours. We may see the same thing happen with messaging, where you can set setting on your phone to only get messages every 2 hours, and then essentially sit down for like 10 or 15 minutes and answer all of your messages. And I think what we mentioned earlier about interoperability, the fact that my messages are scattered across 7 or 8 different platforms makes replying and engaging all the more difficult. And as we have more and more messaging platforms and more messages, that's going to become a lot harder.
Yeah, so I wanted to talk about, we have a question from the chat about user interface. So, SMS, I mean, we could talk about Facebook Messenger too, but I think SMS in particular is interesting because, right, and it's an open source protocol, correct? Would it be classified as that? Is that what it's classified as?
Yeah, I believe so. Yep.
So, it's an open source protocol, and the pros of an open source protocol is there's opportunity because it's not restricted, it's not a closed ecosystem. The cons is it's not restricted, it's the same, no one's improving it, means that like if you think about text, it's literally just on an iPhone a green post, right? It's like a green block of text. So can you talk about how user interface plays a role both with that SMS, what makes it good? What are the constraints? How can it be improved? And then also maybe talk about Facebook Messenger and WhatsApp and those other ones. And I think there's also something to be said about like developing on closed platforms versus open platforms, especially from that user interface perspective.
Yeah, without a doubt. Yes, so we've done lots of research. Let's step back a bit just for a second. A typical text message sent via MMS, right, which is sort of the underlying standard that powers messaging around the world, is limited to about 1,600 characters, right? So that in and of itself is sort of a hard limit for how much content you can send. We've done lots and lots of research for what the optimal length of a course block is, right? A course block being just like a bunch of text explaining a concept or case study in depth. And what we found is that after 1,200 characters, about 2 paragraphs, users start completely nodding off, right? And it doesn't matter whether or not that message is sent over, WhatsApp or over email or over text message. Users will generally start nodding off after about 1,200 characters. And so, a lot of our work in trying to maximize the medium has been about how do we take those 1,200 characters and make them as engaging as we possibly can, right? We found that including emojis in text messages, as stupid as it may sound, has an enormous effect on the impact of a course, right? We've also found that embedding images into text or GIFs into text, we're currently working on the ability to embed TikToks. And embed short videos and short audio files into an Arist text as well. All of those things make an otherwise very constrained experience much richer. And yeah, exactly. That's true. That's a very good point.
Yeah. So someone wrote that emojis represent visual. I don't know if everyone can see the chat, but emojis represent visual. And yeah, that's a very good point. That Keith is making in the chat, because one of the things that people don't understand is it's not just about quality of content, but it's about how that content is distributed, both from like the platform, like how you receive it, but also the visually appealing nature of it. So like, we talk about Twitter and we, I know we interact on Twitter. The best tweets are not like blocks, right? They're not like, hi, my name is X, I do this. It's like, hi, my name is X, then a space, this, and then another space. So it's like, and you could read it really clearly. And I don't think that's just with emojis. I meant more people like with emails. My email, the way I write emails now is like I do a line, I break it, a line, I break it. If I have a question, I bold it. Because people skim, and people skim. So it's really important to be, have that visual communication.
Yeah, without a doubt, without a doubt. Yeah, and it's interesting. I mean, first off, with emojis, I think the main power of emojis is it also makes learning or a text message a lot more personal, right? One of the biggest issues we find with Arist is that we'll have a corporate trainer start using the platform and we'll just copy and paste like a sexual harassment course block right into our platform. And they're like, why am I not getting more engagement with Arist? And it's like, well, the content itself is very, very dry, right? And including making the content more personal and making it sound as if it's coming from a friend instead of from some content mill. That plays a huge role in the efficacy of the content.
Yeah, and Keith made another great point about constraints, and I think that's a very good point. And what's great about text, and I think Twitter is the same way. I think a lot of visual design and both, when I mean design, I mean designing content from the actual writing of the content to how it appears and how it's distributed. When you create artificial constraints, it forces you to think more creatively, but it also forces you to be more concise,
Yeah.
which gets to the point. I think a lot of people, and you see this in writing constantly, because I think when you're in school, right, they're like, oh, I have to be 2 pages, 3 pages. So they think more is better. And then when you get into the workplace and you get into the real world, no, more is not better. It's
right.
How can I take, so that's what's so great, I think, about SMS and what you guys are doing, is it forces constraints among, the instructor, and from a user experience point of view and the user interface itself, it makes the experience better because they're forced to get to the information that actually matters.
Right.
Opposed to, like, in an hour lecture, to your point about the accounting, a guy could talk 30 minutes about his life as an accountant and all the clients he had. And in a text messaging course, nobody cares.
Right, exactly. No, and the thing is I think that same principle is what makes other applications of messaging so successful, right? I mean, if you think of, we use Bank of America, and every single time I log into a Bank of America dashboard, I spend like, at least a minute trying to figure out where like the button is that I actually want to select, right? Because it's super cluttered, super complex. And what we're seeing now is like with a lot of messaging-based banks, which are popping up a lot internationally and will eventually come to the US as well. The interface is super simple, right? It texts you, right? This is your balance. This is how much money you owe on your credit card, right? Like, and then it gives you 3 options. Like, do you want to borrow more money, right? Do you want to, do you want to spend some money, or do you want to transfer money? That's it, right? It makes it super, super easy and breaks down, what is an overcomplicated dashboard with way too much text, right, into a very, very seamless set of decisions that the user can make with like one click, right, or just by typing back.
So, and Keith made a comment about ads, but actually that brings up a question I had. So you think about monetization, one of the things that, I touch on and talk about is sort of, people are always, there's always a race for everyone's attention, right? Everything you do is, attention. I mean, this webinar, right? I wanted people to attend. I had to figure out how do I reach them? How do I get them? Hey, you should spend this 45 minutes, interacting with Ari and Michael on this webinar. But, do you think that, because if you think about your platform, at the end of the day, you guys are going to be relying on paid memberships for a lot of this free content, which, if you think about YouTube, like, they can support it through ads. Is that something where there's going to be advertising monetization over SMS? And if so, is that going to affect that as a protocol? Like, what do you think that looks like from a monetization? And is that something you guys are going to do? If you have free courses, can say, I want to give a free course and I'm going to do it based on downloads, and we're going to offer like ads, right? Is that even, something you guys are thinking about, or something you're talking about?
Yeah, no, that honestly scares the hell out of us. I think as soon as, as Keith mentioned, obnoxious ads get into, end up in your messages, which currently is sort of a sacred space. I think that will very, very quickly end up degrading the medium. So for us, I think for the time being, we're focused primarily on making Arist, um, a paid subscription-based medium, and with free courses being pretty much just subsidized by our subscriptions. One thing that we have considered, however, is I think podcasts have done a really, really good way of embedding advertising in a way that's not terribly obnoxious. Right? It's the podcast, the ads on podcasts are well produced, right? They're seamlessly embedded into the medium, and I think the only type of advertising that we would look at is, for example, if we have a free course on archaeology, right? Just at the bottom of every single text saying like, this course is sponsored by the National Museum of History, right, with a link to learn more about what they do. So if we did end up doing ads, it would have to be extremely seamless. But you know that does scare us a little bit, especially because ad supported business models are very, very turbulent, right? And especially with texting, it's very, very hard to guarantee a certain type of outcome to advertisers. So we'll see how it goes, but so far our goal is sort of to stick to the paid and premium.
And yeah, that's really helpful. And by the way, we have 5 minutes left. I try to keep these 45 minutes. So if anyone has any last minute questions, feel free to put them in the chat. But one question I have for you, and then I also at the end I want to let you give your sort of your pitch about Aries and why people should use it and whatnot. But in terms of you talked about monetization and you talked about podcasting. It's really interesting that you mentioned that, because one of the issues in the podcasting business right now is Joe Rogan's podcast just got bought for $200 million by Spotify, and they're not using RSS, which is for those of you the protocol for sorry, we had a question pop up in the chat, so I'll ask it after. But is not the open source. RSS is the open source protocol, and Spotify does not use RSS. And there's this issue within the podcasting community because RSS is really bad for ads. I don't know if you knew that. Like, it's really hard to track. The reason, I think it was like $670 million for podcast ads this year or something like that. Like, that's not a lot. Like, if you think about like how much Google and Facebook make in ads, and it's because like you don't know if they're doing well, right? I listen to Farnham Street podcast, and Meta Labs is one of their sponsors, and like they have a code. It's like if you contact us, tell us Shane from Farnham Street sent you, and you get 10%, and that's their tracking. But in advertising, right, they call it top of mind awareness, and also retargeting applies here. What happens if that ad, you heard it so many times and you don't remember where you heard it from, right? So like, it's not that straightforward of these protocols are, or with the podcast. Like, so I don't know if it's going to work with text, right? Because of that open source nature, they can't control how it's tracked in a lot of those metrics. So it's just curious. And I know that's a bit of a spiel from me, but yeah, that's just an aside there. But I don't know if you have any thoughts on that. If not, I could jump into the question too.
Yeah. No, I think it's, much of the success of text message courses as a medium, from the way that we think about it, will be about, ensuring that text message courses from the onset are not free, right, to the general public, right? That they are a premium product, right? And that's, a lot of that is sort of difficult to enforce, especially since we do have an open platform where anybody can create courses. But I think one of the reasons why advertising has been difficult with both podcasts and with other news media platforms is because the content at the beginning was presented for free, right? And it wasn't presented as premium content, and users never got used to paying for news or paying for podcasts. And so for us, especially because people do put tons and tons of time and effort into their text message courses, we want to ensure that from the onset, it's a premium product, and people understand the value that comes from it. So that's my 2 cents on that end.
Yeah, and I have some comments, but it's for a different discussion. On June 17th, I'm having Jeff Herman come in, who owns a newspaper in Youngstown. He owns the largest newspaper in Youngstown.
Oh, wow.
So I want to talk to him about, the attention economy and sort of, you talked about giving away free content. That's really the issue with the media industry. They decided, oh, we're just going to put everything on the internet, so we're going to support it with ads, and it hasn't worked out. And by the way, guys, for those who read my blog posts and my newsletter, that's what today's post is going to be about. But onto the question. So, someone in the Q&A is asking, they're starting a startup and they want to know, how to solicit feedback via SMS. So I don't know if that's something your platform does, but I know there's others that we've talked about. Conversational marketing SMS is a huge thing. There's actually a company in Cleveland where I'm from, and I know your parents are from, that does that. But can you, I guess, talk about other use cases? So in this case, getting feedback for a startup via text messaging and SMS.
Yeah. So I think we've sort of lucked out in this regard, because we interact with learners every single day via text message, and so we usually just embed requests for feedback into text message based courses. And actually we have had a number of organizations, particularly actually a Stanford researcher just used Arist to run a pilot, run a study pilot, and gather tons and tons of feedback for some sleep focused research that he's doing. So I think it's a phenomenal platform for getting feedback. In my opinion.
And then,
I
was gonna say, and then I think tactically, she also wants to understand what are the steps to doing that through your platform.
Got it. Yeah. So I'm going to put my email in the chat, because I do want to be mindful of the time. I'm happy to chat about that more in depth. Just how to use. I'll
put it in the. Yeah, and I share. There you go. Put it in. So yeah, and for the person who's asking, I always, if they write it to the panelists, I always don't tell them the name. But if it's public, then I say the name. So for the person who asked, you can email Michael, but I'm going to post on YouTube the webinar along with Michael's contact info. To end it on sort of this note, can you just give the spiel, what you guys are doing in full, pitch me as a customer, what exactly you guys are doing, and exciting things you're working on for future features. I know you talked about you're doing Substack for texting. So, just give that spiel, and then, we can wrap things up.
Sure thing. Yeah. So our goal is, Arist is a text message learning platform that helps individuals and organizations create text message based courses in minutes. Our goal is to help, help creators build courses as fast as they possibly can, and create courses that learners will love and engage with. As I mentioned today, we have course completion and satisfaction rates of over 90%. And we found that users also are really willing to pay for text message courses. So we're starting to see that it's become a really, really meaningful second or third source of income for a lot of content creators. We believe that text message based courses can dramatically affect the way that people learn. We believe that embedding learning into the flow of a person's day and making learning as frictionless as possible can have a dramatic effect on both our learning and our long-term retention of learning. So yeah, over the course of the next few months, we're going to be building out a lot of other tools for creators to simultaneously create different forms of text message learning content, but also to engage their audience in a greater way. We are building, or are in the process of building Substack for text messages. So essentially a feature that will allow independent creators to charge for text message course streams, and we're pretty excited about where that's going to go as well. So yeah, if anyone's interested, you can go to our website. It's arist.co, like Aristotle, and yeah, and we'd love to get you set up.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much for joining me. I'm going to post in the chat now the YouTube channel, and it actually is available immediately, the replay of this, so you guys can come and see the replay of this event. And yeah, thanks again, Michael, for joining us. Really appreciate it. And have a good day, everyone.
Thanks so much. Thanks for having me.